All right, guys. So next section, into the mortgage chapter. What? That's good to know because I always think she's so loud. I always close my door. So we are looking at when you're actually purchasing the home. Okay, we're going to spend today and Monday on this section, so we're only going to do 2 parts of it today. So we're going to look at the first thing, the computing your closing cost, and then your prepaid interest. I don't know about you guys, how much you know about buying a house. When I first bought our first house, I was clueless. I remember like talking to like our realtor and everything after we agreed on a price. I'm like, okay, and like, we're borrowing the money. We got like a new home buyers thing when we bought our loan. We didn't have to put anything down. We got really lucky. I don't know if that even exists anymore. But then we go to closing. Closing's like where you actually meet with everybody, sign all the paperwork, exchange keys, all that, actually get the house. And they told me how much money I was going to have to pay that day. I about fell over. Like, no one told me in advance. So then it was like scrambling to try to get all that money like together. So I'm doing you a favor today and teaching you that when you buy a house, extra money gets paid that day you actually like exchange hands with the house. It's shocking how much actually gets paid on that day. I had no idea. All right, so what will the American dream cost you, right? American dreams, your house, right? 2.5 children, white picket fence. That's like the average number of children or something was like 2.5. It's an average. I know. Some have 2, some have 3, right? Like I have 3. I know, I said it's an average. Anyway, so one of the biggest concerns for a prospective homeowner is the cost in both the immediate and the distant future, and that is very true. Buying a house is expensive. All right, so the costs are in 2 categories. So the first type are recurring cost. Recurring cost, which we've already talked about recurring cost. That's your mortgage payments, your insurance payments, the property taxes, right? That's your mortgage with escrow. Escrow is including the insurance and your property taxes. Okay, so those are recurring because they keep happening over and over. Every month you're going to make that payment. And then non-recurring costs, they're just one-time things. So the cost to actually move, you got to hire someone possibly to move all your stuff. And then a lot of the closing costs, things that you'll pay when you go to actually get the keys of the house. All of those costs, just a one-time thing. That's a lot, but it's a one-time thing. All right, and then I keep referring to it a closing. That's the meeting attended by the buyer, the seller, their attorneys. We didn't have any attorneys present at ours. And a representative of the lending institution, so somebody from the bank, whoever is taking care of your loan and everything. So this is where the official sale takes place, which is you may not realize, like once you go see a house, let's say you want to buy the house, you guys agree on a price, like you agreed, you don't get the house like right then. It's usually 30 days later, so a whole month after you agree on a house, I'm going to buy this house, it's usually 30 days later. Because you have to have inspections, you have to do all the paperwork necessary to get your mortgage, you have to do your title work, like there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of stuff. So it's usually a 30-day, they set your closing at 30 days. Sometimes they're 60 or 90, just depending on the sellers, but typically it's 30. You're right. So a lot of times you'll see sale pending on a house, and it'll say sale pending for a long time. It's because they've agreed on a price, and they're just waiting for all the paperwork to go through to closing. At any time closing or after. Because you'll get the keys at closing. So like us, we started moving in the day we closed on our house. We literally left the office where we had signed a bunch of paperwork and went straight to the house with our first load of stuff. We had it with us. We were ready to go. I mean, we went in and like cleaned really well first because, it was clean when you move in, but like it wasn't my definition of clean. All right, so next thing is earnest money deposits. Earnest money or good faith deposit is money paid to the seller by an interested buyer to show that you're serious. So like when we bought our first house, we paid them $1,000 once we agreed on a price. It was paid before closing, right? We went ahead, wrote a check for $1,000, gave it to our real estate agent, and then they went ahead and gave it to them. Now, if we had backed out on the sale within that 30 days, we didn't get that money back. Okay, so it's good faith. It's showing, yep, I'm putting money, here's $1,000 towards the price of the house. I am buying this house, right? It's just making sure that you don't just back out on it. All right, attorney fees. Fees paid to your attorney in return for representation at the meeting. Attorney fees, a lot of times you never even actually see the attorney. It's just somebody like your bank has on retainer, right? Somebody your bank has, it does all of the paperwork for you. Origination fee. This is money paid to the bank for the paperwork involved in the loan process. It is amazing how much paperwork goes into this. I remember sitting at closing and the amount of papers that they like sign this, initial this, sign this, initial, like I should have just handed them my firstborn child. It would have been easier. It was ridiculous. You sign so much stuff. But origination fee is just a fee that you're paying the bank to do all that paperwork for you. To like draw it all up, print it out, get it all organized for you. Your title. You guys have heard of, I'm sure, of a title office. You know, you have a title usually to your car. You have a title then for your house too. It's the legal claim that is your property that you're purchasing. It's common practice that before a property can change hands, a title search is conducted because they're making sure that there's no like liens on that property, making sure the person selling it actually does in fact own it and not like their great grandmother or something. They have to be the ones that are on the title in order to sell it to you. Yes. Yeah. Yep. I think so. I think you could use those hand in hand. But yeah. It would go through like the court system, and then it would eventually, if they had family, would get passed and put into their family's name. But if they don't have family, then the state usually takes care of it. Somebody from the state. The first house that we bought, that's what happened. There was an older lady that owned the home. She passed away, and she didn't have any family, so it got left. The state dealt with it. So the person that sold it to us was just somebody from the state. Yeah. You get a better deal when it's somebody from the state because they want to get rid of it. All right, points. You ever hear somebody purchasing points for a loan? You guys ever heard that? It's a crazy concept when I first heard this. Points are extra fees charged by the lending institution for the use of their money. Each point is equivalent to 1% of the loan amount. So you can purchase points to lower your interest rate. You would pay like an upfront fee purchasing points, and it lowers your interest rate that you pay then for like the 30-year mortgage. And we'll look, the next section after this one is all about points. So we'll get into those a lot. So there's two types, origination points. It's similar to origination fees. They're collected from the buyer as a means of paying for the loan application process. So again, those are just things that you're going to have to pay when you get a loan. But then there are discount points that reduce the interest rate of the loan. So they generally lower the interest rate by 0.25% or 0.375% on an adjustable rate mortgage. So these percentages vary depending on the bank. So it's really important when you guys do get a loan someday for a house, shop around. Banks are very different on the percentages they'll give you. Okay. Prepaid interest. First thing we're going to learn to do mathematically today. Mortgage interest is not paid like rent, right? Rent is paid ahead of time. So you would pay like rent now, like usually when you rent an apartment, you're like paying first and last month's rent, right? Before you even move into the place. So you're paying it ahead of time. Mortgage interest is paid afterwards. It's paid in, it's called arrears. Easy to remember, right? Your rear, it's behind you. It's paid after the fact. So interest starts accruing or starts building at the beginning of each month and continues throughout the month. When you make your mortgage payment, you're paying the interest that is built up on the money borrowed during the month that passed. So if I'm making, December's payment, I'm paying the interest from November, the month before me. Whereas renting, I would pay November's rent in October. I'd pay it ahead of time. Mortgage interest, I'm paying for the month that just passed. All right, so when you make your mortgage payment, you're paying interest that's built up during the month that passed. Prepaid interest at closing is the amount of mortgage interest due to cover the time from closing to when the first mortgage payment is due. Because when you first buy your house, let's say I'm closing on December 20th. I could take control of the house. My first mortgage payment is probably not going to be due until the very next month, like a month later, okay, because you're always paying it after the fact. So for example, if you close on the 10th day of a 30-day month, you'll need to prepay 20 days of interest at closing. So they make you pay the interest from that point until the end of the month. So if you want to pay less in closing, then you should close on the house at the end of the month. You have less interest. All right, and then we have transfer tax, fee that's charged for the transfer of the title from the seller to the buyer. So not only do they do a title search to make sure the right person's name is on there, that they have the right to sell it, and they'll charge you to search for that. Then they'll also charge you to transfer that title into your name. They charge you for every little bitty thing possible when you buy a house. Well, then that opens up a whole different can of worms. No, but But it's totally worth it. Brian? Yeah. One of the other things they do when they do your title search is they make sure that whoever owned the property previously doesn't have outstanding debt on that property. Maybe they haven't paid their property taxes in years. If that's the case and you take over, you have to pay all that backed up property tax. So you want to make sure that you do a title search to make sure it's clean. Why? Because it's on that property. Otherwise, they won't release that property to you. I know. Yeah. If you build your own house, well, then you'd have to make sure you'd have to own the land. So you'd still have to have a title search for the land that you're buying. So they're still going to go through part of that. I know. It's worth it, though. I swear it's worth it to own a house. It's totally worth it. Buy a trailer. They lose their value like that. True. You could drive it where you want. True. Just be outside. Listen, you guys, just be outside. All right, anyway, so how do you calculate the prepaid interest? That's the first thing we're going to focus on, okay? So prepaid interest, you take the amount that you're borrowing, multiply that by whatever your interest rate is, divide by 365. So what am I finding? How much interest per day? If I'm dividing by 365, that's the number of days in a year, okay? And then you multiply that by the days to be paid. So you have your red formula sheets, yes? On your red formula sheet, this is on there. Notice what I wrote right underneath that big old parenthesis. Does everybody see what it says? Rounded to the nearest cent, then multiply it by the number of days to be paid. I have a lot of students who want to type this whole thing in and they keep all those decimal digits out there, and then their final answer is it's off by a few cents because they didn't round it first. So you're going to round it so you know exactly how much the interest is per day to the cent. Then you multiply it by how many days. Okay, that's usually the biggest mistake people make with this whole part. I do a little calendar. It's in your notes. It's also on here. If you're wondering why I put this calendar on here, I don't even know what year this calendar's from, to be honest with you. That's not the point. I put it on there because I have students I've found in the past who don't know how many days are in each month. You better be joking right now. So I put it on there so you can't use that argument for me, okay? How many days their calendar's on there. All right, so let's go ahead and calculate the prepaid interest. So if I'm borrowing $79,000, interest rate's 4.25%, and I'm closing on October 18th, which was yesterday. All right, so let's go ahead and go through the process then. So you're going to take the amount you borrowed, which is $79,000. We're going to multiply that by our interest rate, so 0.0425. And then we're going to divide that by 365. So let's do that first, because we need to round that to the nearest cent before we do anything else. All right, so what do you get when you multiply and then divide by 365? $9.20? Yes, good. All right, and then we have to multiply that by how many days are left in the month. So if I'm closing on October 18th, How many more days is it until the end of the month? How many days are in October? Good, it'd be 13 more days. There's 31 days in October. 31 minus 18 is 13. Okay, so that means my interest that I'm being charged is $9.20 per day. So then I have to pay for 13 days. I got to pay out the rest of the month when I go to closing. So $9.20 times 13. I'm going to have to pay $119.60 in prepaid interest at my closing. Now, if I had closed like on October 1st, I'd have to pay a lot more prepaid interest, right? Because I'd have more days of the month that I'd have to pay for. If you want to pay less in prepaid interest, yeah. Yep. You could, yeah. Like we closed on our house on October 24th, so we were towards the end. Yeah, you had to pay like 1 day, which only borrow on 79,000. It was $9.20. That's not bad. Yeah, that we can handle, right? All right, take a look at the next one. How much will be charged in prepaid interest on a $400,000 loan with an APR of 6% that was closed on December 14th? All right, so same idea. It's amount borrowed, which is $400,000. Multiply that by our interest rate, so 0.06. Divide that by 365. Get that answer to the nearest cent before you do the rest of it. So what is that going to give you? Kyle, what'd you get? Amanda? Good. $65.75. That's per day how much interest you're being charged. How many days do I still have until the end of the month of December? 17 more days. Because again, the 14th is when I'm closing. There are 31 days in December. So 31 minus 14, I have 17 more days. To make it the easiest, just subtract. Right, there's 31 days, so 31 minus 14, that's the easiest way to do it, instead of actually counting. I know we're used to counting on our fingers for that other stuff, right? They do. So $1,117.75. Why is that one so much higher than the last one? Good, it was earlier in the month, the loan's more, and the interest rate's higher. Yeah, so all of those things combined, I'm paying a whole lot more. All right, now what happens when somebody makes a down payment? It takes money off how much you're actually borrowing, right? So if Leah and Josh are buying a $600,000 home, and they've been approved for a 7.25% mortgage, which is a really high interest rate, by the way. They made a 15% down payment and will be closing on September 6th. So how much will they pay in prepaid interest? So are they borrowing $600,000? No, they're not. So how do I figure out how much they're actually borrowing? Nathan? Okay, and then what do I do with that number? And then subtract it. Good. So we're going to take 600,000, and it says they did 15%. So we got to multiply that by the 15%. 90,000. Whew. So this was their down payment. They paid that ahead of time. So then we have to take the 600,000 and subtract the 90,000. So how much did they actually borrow? 510. That's their loan amount. Yeah, so anytime you see that somebody made a down payment on a house, you got to take that off, okay? All right, so now can I figure out the prepaid interest? Yeah, because now I know the loan amount was actually 510,000. multiply that by our interest rate, 0.0725, divide by 365. So how much are they paying per day? Per day. You gave me their whole prepaid. Good. So that was their interest per day. And how many more days do they have? Bless you. 24. Good. Because there's September 6th. There's 30 days in September. So 24 days worth. So, Joanne, what was that number you got? Perfect. $2,431.20. Amanda. Welcome to the real world. Well, it just depends on like when they agreed on a price to the house, when they can do closing, because you want to make sure that both parties can be there. Like, you want to take control of the house as soon as you can, though, right? Don't you want to move in? Brian? You'd pay a lot less in prepaid interest, yeah. All right, number 4. Beth is buying a $67,000 house. That sounds more reasonable than the $600,000 house, right? And has saved 20% for a down payment. She has an APR of 5.5% and is closing on May 12th. How much should she expect to pay in prepaid interest at the closing? So what do we do first? Good. Find the down payment by multiplying by the 20%. Okay, so I have 67,000 times the 0.20, which is 13,400. So what is 13,400? What's that stand for? That's their down payment, right? It's how much they paid down. All right, so 67,000 minus their down payment. Their loan amount then was $53,600. So you just have to do a little extra step if they made a down payment. All right, and then how much in prepaid interest? $53,600 times their interest rate divided by 365. So how much are they paying per day? $8.08. My husband would love that we just got that for an answer. Does anybody remember what my husband's name is? Close. His name's Robert, but he goes by Bob. So anytime he sees 808, he said it's his name. A lot of them don't. Bobby. My husband was Bobby in school. He's Bob now that he's older. But yeah, so like twice a day he said it's his minute. 8:08 a.m., 8:08 p.m. He's like, yep, it's my minute. Because it looks like it says Bob. Yeah. Roby. That's different. My husband has a cousin named Robert. He goes by Rob. So they were Bob and Rob growing up. All right, how many more days do they have? How many days are in May? There's 31 in May. So how many more days? 19. So they're going to pay $153.52. All right, so how are we feeling on prepaid interest? Easy? All right. The other part I want to cover today, fairly simple, is closing cost. I can't actually give you an exact amount of what your closing cost will be because it depends on, obviously, how much money you're borrowing. And it also is based on kind of like, where do you go to get all this done? Different title offices charge different amounts. Different lawyers charge different amounts. Banks charge different fees. So what we're going to look at is a rough idea of where they'll be, okay? So closing costs vary usually between 2 to 7% of your loan. 2 to 7%. What? Depends on what bank you go through. Some of them let you pick your own, and some of them, they just use their one in-house. So for closing costs, it's the cost of your home. Now, notice it said cost of your home. Did it say a loan amount? No. Cost of your home times the closing percent. So for this, do I care about any down payments? I don't. So maybe make yourselves a note here. Ignore down payment. Oh my goodness, I can't write today. And if you look at your red formula sheet, look where it says closing cost. What's on there? Ignore down payment. Okay, I want to make sure you remember that, okay? Closing cost is the cost of the home, not necessarily your mortgage payment or your loan amount. All right, so Shannon was approved for a $340,000 mortgage. What range of cost might she expect to pay at closing? And again, could it be less? Yeah. Could it be more? Maybe. But on average, it's between 2 to 7%. So what range of cost might she expect? Well, you take the cost of the home, so $340,000. You multiply by the percent. So as little as 2%, so 0.02, or it could be as much as 7%. So we're going to multiply by those two percentages, and we're going to get our range. So she's going to pay roughly how much? On the cheap end, she could pay only $6,800, but she could pay as much as $23,800. That's a heck of a range. Yeah. So anywhere from $6,800 to $23,800. All right, now guys, if you're like me, you see those numbers and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be able to buy a house, right? You kind of freak out. You're like, I don't have that kind of extra money sitting around. They do have different types of loans. Like for us, when we bought our current house, you know, we had enough for like the down payment, but like I can't afford all that extra stuff at closing. So for us, we were able to get a type of loan that our interest rate was slightly higher by like 0.25%, something like that. And then it wrapped all of our closing costs into the loan for us. So ours were like included in the loan. I didn't have to have that money up front. So there are types of loans that you could do that with. So don't panic that you're like, I'm never going to buy a house. I'd have to look. I don't know. Number 2, Jason is closing on a $430,000 home. He made a 13% down payment and is borrowing the rest. What is his approximate range of cost that he might expect to pay at closing? And again, closing's that meeting where we're signing all the paperwork, I'm getting my keys, and I get the house. So, 13%. Do I need to calculate what the 13% is? Why not? Ignore the down payment. If I had asked for prepaid interest, would you have to do something with it? Yeah. But since I'm talking closing, I don't care. Ignore the down payment. We're not talking about that. Okay, so $430,000. Ignore the down payment. So it's going to range between what percent and what percent? 2 to 7%. So multiply it by 2%. Multiply it by 7%. So on the cheap end, what's the cheapest amount that he's going to get out paying? How much? Whew. That's on the cheap end, you guys. But on the high end? So how important is it to shop around for the best rates? Very important. That's a huge range. You could try that too. I mean, that'd be nice. But I've seen what careers you guys want. Most of you aren't going to be there. I'm not there either. I'm not rich. I'm not rich either. Most people aren't. I'm not saying you're not going to be comfortable, but we're just not going to be so rich that you're like, 30 grand, no big deal. No, not there. All right, last problem, number 3. Becky was told that based on the price of her home, her approximate closing cost would range from $4,000 to $14,000. How much was the price of her home? We divide. Look how we set up the first one, just so you can kind of see what's going on. The purchase price multiplied by the percent, the 2%, gave us what the price was. So on the cheap end, it was $4,000. So in order to solve that, you're actually dividing. Amanda? 200,000? Do I need to do this again to double check? Yeah, you absolutely could, right? I could do it times the 0.7%, and that one would be the 14,000. But you should get the same thing, right? Obviously, if I multiply the same number by a different percent, right, I should still get the $200,000 house. All right, that's as far as the new stuff I want to cover today. How are we feeling? Okay? Pretty easy today?